Welcome back to Comic Cappers. Today we will be capping in Absolute Green Lantern number 5. The barrier has fallen, but as Hector Hammond moves to claim the spoils of the Evergreen experiment, the true cost of this cosmic harvest is finally laid bare. With that said, grab a snack, sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride. The Abin Sur entity begins its cold, cosmic interrogation, locking onto a target named Todd Rice with a terrifying singular command. This isn't a trial in any sense we understand. The entity makes it clear it's not judging him, it's analyzing him as a complete anomaly, an unknown variable that doesn't fit into the established spectrum of light. The command repeats, a rhythmic, maddening refrain that feels less like a request and more like a psychological breaking point. The entity is forcing a confrontation with absolute terror. Just as the entity pushes its demand, the cosmic pressure snaps. A sudden, blinding flash of light cuts through the darkness, interrupted by the frantic cries of survivors digging through the wreckage, desperate to find someone buried beneath the rubble. Rescue workers in hazmat suits scramble through the wreckage of Evergreen, stabilizing a victim who is barely clinging to life. He's incoherent, muttering about the alien entity, Abin Sur, and his delirium is a clear symptom of the trauma caused by the catastrophic event. One of the workers attempts to calm the injured man, urging him to stop talking and save his strength, not realizing the cold reality of their situation. Suddenly, the dynamic shifts. A worker is abruptly dismissed, ordered to lose the suit and walk home, clearing the way for someone much more dangerous. In the distance, a figure approaches, cutting through the chaos with unsettling calm. Hector Hammond steps into the frame, his presence instantly radiating predatory opportunism. He makes it clear that medical aid isn't a right, it's a resource he controls. Hammond looms over the victim, his smile predatory and condescending. He isn't here to save lives, he's here to extract information. The victim, barely conscious, delivers a haunting account of the disaster, capturing the sheer scale of the destruction. We're inside the mind of a survivor, and the trauma is visceral. They describe the destruction of Evergreen as if it were a biblical catastrophe, comparing the impact to God's fist striking the city. Trapped beneath the wreckage of their own cafe, they call out for Hal Jordan, desperate for a rescue that feels impossible. The perspective widens to show the haunting stillness of the dome that has consumed the town. The survivor notes that those caught deeper inside were never going to make it out. The Abin Sur entity made sure of that. It's a chilling reminder that the survival rate here isn't just low, it was essentially zero. We shift to a man standing amidst the ruins, his posture reflecting the weight of the moment. He realizes Hal was on the outside when the roof fell, meaning he likely believes his companion is dead. The survivor wonders if Hal would have abandoned them, but the mystery of what truly happened next remains locked in the dust and the silence. Hal Jordan is at his breaking point, training a handgun on the Abin Sur entity. He's convinced the entity has abducted or corrupted Jo Mullein, and he isn't backing down. The tension spikes as Hal screams for answers, his voice raw with desperation. He needs to know where Jo is, and he needs to know it now. Hal shoves the gun forward, demanding the truth. He's past the point of negotiation, ready to pull the trigger on a cosmic horror that barely seems to notice him. The entity remains terrifyingly detached, dismissing Jo as a mere anomaly. It views her power as a mistake in the system, something that shouldn't exist in the spectrum of light. Hal, completely out of his depth, tries to process this alien logic. He just wants Jo back, but the entity is already moving on to its next cold calculation. The entity drops a chilling ultimatum. Jo is marked, and now it turns its focus to Hal, commanding him to embrace the very thing he's been fighting. Hal's eyes widen as the entity's command takes hold. He's being forced into a nightmare he can't escape. Hal Jordan snaps. He empties his magazine into the Abin Sur entity, the gunfire erupting in a frantic, desperate rhythm. But the bullets are useless. The weapon clicks empty, leaving Hal standing in the silence of his own failure. He stares down the barrel, his face a mask of grief and exhaustion, fully realizing he is out of options. He wipes a tear, his voice trembling with the weight of the loss he's carrying. He screams his rage at the cosmic horror, mourning everything that was taken from him. Hal's voice cracks as he tries to confront the entity, but the parasite isn't finished with him yet. The entity interrupts him with a single, terrifying word, as the black hand corruption begins to consume Hal's own hand. Hal's worst fears are realized as the dark, viscous infection surges up his arm, physically binding him to the entity's will. He screams in pure, unadulterated terror as the reality of his corruption sets in. The Abin Sur entity looms, its cold, alien features unmoving as it delivers the final, soul-crushing verdict, forcing Hal to confront the source of his undoing. Hal Jordan is fighting a losing battle against the infection, desperate to tear the encroaching corruption from his body. The Black Hand's influence is absolute, turning his own limb into a weapon of pure, dark malice. It's a gruesome display of power as the infection spreads, claiming more of him with every passing second. Hal reels back, horrified by his own transformation. The Abin Sur entity, now a swirling vortex of shadow, declares the judgment phase finished, leaving Hal to grapple with the terrifying implications of what comes next. The entity's voice is cold, detached, and utterly chilling, forcing Hal to confront the cosmic dread it's unleashing upon him. The warnings grow more cryptic and ominous as the entity demands Hal surrender to the absolute terror of the Black Hand. In his final, broken moment, Hal is left staring into the abyss as the entity whispers the name of their ultimate, looming destruction, the Black Star. Back at the site of the disaster, a survivor finally finishes his harrowing account, admitting he just blacked out after the chaos unfolded. Hector Hammond, ever the cold, calculated opportunist, couldn't care less about the survivor's well-being. When his subordinate suggests medical treatment, Hammond brushes it off with terrifying indifference, clearly more interested in the black goop they've harvested from the scene than any human life. Hammond makes his intentions crystal clear. He wants the survivor kept alive for further interrogation. He's already pivoting his focus to the bigger targets in his sights, Hal Jordan and the anomaly herself, Jo Mullein. The tension between these two finally reaches a breaking point. Jo Mullein, glowing with the volatile energy of the ring, makes it clear she is done playing games with a spiraling Hal Jordan. She doesn't hesitate. With a massive, concussive blast, she sends Hal flying, cutting through the desert air with raw, unchecked power. As the dust settles, the corruption takes center stage. Hal, barely holding himself together, reveals the tragic misunderstanding that fueled his descent. He watched the cafe collapse, saw Todd Rice perish, and believed Jo had been vaporized in that same green flash. He admits that his desperate, erratic actions, including pulling that trigger, were born from the grief of believing he'd lost her. But the infection is winning. His face contorted by the Black Hand's influence, Hal demands an answer, his voice cracking with the strain of a man losing his humanity to the parasite. He needs to know how she survived and exactly where she's been. Jo Mullein's hand hits the desert floor, the ring's green energy bleeding into the sand as she prepares to unleash a counterattack. She launches herself forward, fully encased in the ring's construct aura, closing the distance between herself and the corrupted Hal Jordan with terrifying speed. Her eyes are locked on him, cold and focused, as she delivers a single loaded word that cuts through the chaos. A massive, concussive wave of green energy erupts, tearing through the landscape and throwing up a wall of dust and debris. Hal, overwhelmed by the parasite, lets out a guttural, pained cry as the force of the blast hits him, his body buckling under the sheer intensity of the Green Lantern's power. As Jo leaps away, she leaves him in the dirt, delivering the final, haunting explanation for the nightmare they're trapped in. Jo Mullein tries to rationalize the madness, describing her arrival in the desert not as a choice, but as a compulsion. She felt a pull, a magnetic, inescapable gravity drawing her toward the epicenter of the catastrophe. Hal is barely holding it together. He corrects her with a frantic, broken intensity, revealing that the pull isn't just cosmic, it's the Black Hand infection, a sentient parasite that's hijacking his very existence. The corruption is forcing him to witness the atrocities he's committing. He's terrified, struggling to process why this is happening to him, and the words barely escape his lips. The panel flashes an aggressive, warning red. The blame is shifting from the cosmic entity to a singular, personal target. Hal's face is completely overtaken by the void. He finally lashes out at Jo, pinning the entire nightmare, the destruction of Evergreen and his own infection, directly on her. Hal's humanity is completely eclipsed by the Black Hand infection. He's no longer just speaking, he's projecting the entity's own twisted logic, accusing Jo of causing the Evergreen catastrophe and stealing the Abin Sur's power. Jo, caught in a surreal, glowing state, is bewildered. She doesn't recognize the voice coming from the monstrosity that was once her friend. Hal's face barely emerges from the darkness, his expression twisted in agony as he narrows his blame down to a single, specific point of origin. The focus shifts to the ring itself, glowing like a target. It's the source of the infection, the catalyst for the entire nightmare. The corruption reaches a fever pitch. Hal, now fully consumed by the entity's demand, screams at Jo to strip herself of the ring, viewing it as the only way to purge the rot. Jo is left stunned, her face illuminated by the ring's light, trying to process the horrifying demand as the reality of their situation collapses around them. Hal's voice, now warped and demanding, cuts through the tension as he orders Jo to surrender the ring. The scene shifts to a memory, or perhaps a hallucination, of Jo standing at a doorway with a suitcase, highlighting the personal history being weaponized against her. The manipulation deepens. Hal weaponizes the concept of commitment, forcing Jo to confront the weight of her past promises. He twists the sacred Green Lantern oath into a tool of psychological torture, trying to break her resolve by reminding her of the vows she once held dear. Jo is visibly shaken, her eyes closed as she tries to shut out the taunts. She's grappling with the realization that the version of Hal she knew is being used to dismantle her sense of self. Hal pivots to pure biting resentment, accusing Jo of her habitual tendency to flee when things get difficult. He strips away the layers of her life, listing her job, her parents, and their relationship as things she's abandoned, ultimately claiming ownership of the ring itself. Jo snaps. The green energy flares around her in a blinding burst of defiance. She isn't running anymore, she's ready to fight. Jo Mullein isn't playing around anymore. She fires a concentrated blast of pure ring energy directly at Hal, the air crackling with the sound of a violent discharge. The impact is absolute. A massive, blinding green flare consumes the space where Hal was standing, leaving nothing but a silhouette of raw power. In the aftermath, the energy dissipates to reveal a horrific sight. Hal is no longer fighting as a man, he's being consumed, his very form twisting into a nightmarish, shadowy echo of himself as he lets out a guttural, inhuman scream. Jo stands her ground, ring glowing, watching in horror as the corruption takes hold. She realizes too late that the blast didn't stop the infection, it only accelerated the transformation. The corruption fully breaks free. A massive, blackened, claw-like construct erupts from Hal's position, looming over the battlefield like a dark omen while Jo desperately tries to retreat from the encroaching void. Hector Hammond stands amid the ruins of Evergreen, his frustration palpable as he stares at the impenetrable barrier shielding the Green Lantern's sight. He views the cosmic power not as a wonder, but as property he's been denied. His team reports that their sophisticated tech is completely useless against the hull of the containment field. It's a total wall, and Hammond's patience is wearing paper-thin. Just as Hammond's irritation peaks, a subordinate rushes in with an urgent update. The stalemate in the desert is finally breaking, and something is heading their way from the southwest. Hector Hammond is at the end of his rope, clearly paranoid about the Lazarus Project. But his subordinate has something much more visceral to show him, pointing toward a massive, unnatural green signature approaching their position. Through the targeting scope, we see the terrifying reality of the situation. It's not just a light, it's a nightmarish, corrupted limb, a manifestation of the Black Hand infection hurtling directly toward them. Hammond doesn't hesitate. He orders his air support to stand down immediately. He knows better than to engage forces he doesn't fully understand yet. When his subordinate questions the order, Hammond drops the mask of the polite employer. He's not here for a fight, he's here for a discovery. He views the entire catastrophe as a puzzle box, and he's finally found the tools to crack it open. And those tools are here. The corrupted, monstrous Hal Jordan and the defiant Jo Mullein are closing in, and for Hammond this isn't a tragedy, it's the breakthrough he's been waiting for. The Black Hand infection is fully unleashed, a monstrous, shadow-drenched limb reaching out through the desert air as a manifestation of pure cosmic corruption. Jo Mullein is caught in the fray, desperately trying to evade the encroaching darkness. She lets out a pained cry, realizing the gravity of the situation as the void closes in. Fighting back with everything she has, Jo channels the ring's energy into a desperate, point-blank blast, straining against the suffocating power of the infection. Back at the extraction site, Hector Hammond remains chillingly detached. While his team reports on the anomaly struggle, he shows zero concern for the lives at stake, focused entirely on the data his instruments are finally pulling from the chaos. Hammond stares into the green-tinted horizon with a terrifying, ecstatic grin. He knows he's watching something unprecedented, and he's clearly relishing every second of the destruction. Hector Hammond watches in absolute awe as a massive, monolithic structure, a literal Green Lantern construct of impossible scale, tears through the desert landscape. To him, this isn't a catastrophe, it's a revelation. He turns, his expression twisted into a predatory, ecstatic grin. He has finally cracked the code. Jo Mullein isn't just a participant in this cosmic experiment, she's the component he has been hunting for all along. As Hammond gloats, the reality of his discovery hits home. Jo is struggling, her body and the ring's energy being pushed to a breaking point, as she fights to maintain control against the overwhelming, parasitic influence of the corruption. The strain becomes almost too much to bear. Jo's eyes glow with a terrifying intensity as she lets out a final, agonizing grunt of exertion, teetering on the edge of total collapse. As the cosmic phenomenon reaches its fever pitch, the focus narrows onto our primary anomaly, Sojourner Mullein. She's suspended in the air, ring glowing, caught in the throes of a reality-warping struggle that defies explanation. Down below, the Black Hand corruption manifests as a grotesque, reaching limb, emitting a pained, guttural sound as it desperately claws at the energy Jo is projecting. Jo pivots with frantic intensity, channeling the ring's light to sever the connection, desperate to escape the parasitic pull of the infection before it claims her completely. Jo Mullein is pushed to the absolute limit, her construct wings flaring as she grapples with the parasitic, reality-bending tendrils of the Black Hand corruption reaching out from the desert floor. High above the decimated landscape of Evergreen, the Green Lantern symbol burns like a beacon, a massive, ominous construct that hangs in the sky, casting a sickly, overwhelming green hue over the entire region. Down below, Hector Hammond is losing his composure, his predatory obsession eclipsing all professional detachment. He's screaming at his team, terrified that the data he's hunting will slip through his fingers if they don't capture every second of this cosmic event. Energy crackles through the atmosphere, a blinding surge of power that seems to be tearing the very fabric of the environment apart as the extraction reaches a breaking point. The dust settles just enough to frame the two figures caught in the center of this nightmare, Sojourner Mullein and Hal Jordan, the two pieces of a puzzle that may just dismantle reality itself. The Abin Sur entity anchors the center of this cosmic void, glowing with an intense golden light as it dictates the terms of judgment. Hal Jordan and Jo Mullein are suspended in the darkness around it, caught in a state of purgatory that defies physical law. The entity's final command is chillingly simple, stripping away the very foundation of the Green Lantern mythos. As the issue draws to a close, it leaves us with a terrifying ultimatum that echoes into the unknown. And that unfortunately concludes our comic cap for today. If the Abin Sur entity is forcing Hal and Jo to exist without fear, does that mean they are losing their humanity? Or is this the ultimate evolution of what it means to be a Green Lantern? Let me know your answer in the comments section down below. Be sure to subscribe and press that notification bell for daily comic caps. Until next time, take care, brush your hair, I'll see you when I see you, peace.